Good day, everyone. My name is Steve Volk, and on behalf of my teammates Foy, Chau, and my Lamb DM, wanted to introduce you guys to our topic, the comparative analysis in the footwear industry in a couple different countries in Africa. We've got one in Ethiopia, another in Zimbabwe, and actually one of the companies that we did our analysis on was Mai's company that she selected for her module 5 and 6 as the what we say the really thriving and company that's really setting themselves apart. So we use that as our baseline. So what I want to do over the next couple of minutes is kind of talk through the companies, some of the background, and how that ties to the countries they were in. Go through the ICT comp, PA versus NEA, and some contrasts, some interesting things as we look at that, a little bit about the vision, and then finally resonant and dissonant leadership, and we'll kind of wrap it from there. So let's talk through the companies. We have two companies. The first one called Soul Rebels, a company in Ethiopia established in 2004 and really has built a really fun model around sustainable shoes. And what makes this even more interesting is the founder really built it as a way to bring artisans and a community that was struggling and find work for them. And it's turned into a multinational company and really built beyond what had been previous struggling in that area. And we're going to contrast that against a company in Zimbabwe called the Courtney Boot Company. That's been established since 1991, has grown, but on the surface, it actually looks like they're doing okay. However, there's been some struggles there, both that we think has kind of been self-inflicted, but also been inflicted from the country and the economy that they're in, that we'll talk to. But some interesting tidbits with Courtney Boot Company, they use game skin to build their shoes. So an interesting dynamic there that both companies are very resourceful and using product and raw material that in America I don't think we even think twice about using, right? Because of the supply of material that we can get our hands on. So on that note, I want to talk about the kind of the intentional change comparison and look at what Soul Rebels was doing in Courtney Boot Company. So the founder really developed a deep passion, and we talk about ideal self, of creating jobs for artisans and looking at what that could do. And the big difference is the deep roots compared to Soul Rebel and to Courtney. So back to Soul Rebel, really a deep, rooted very deep in. We just want to get a response, an answer to the folks in the community and really build that. And with that, they were able to identify higher wages actually to be able to bring more workers into their fold and really create a lifestyle for some of these workers of them. They play a very dynamic role in the economy. The founder pushes herself and her workers to expand their education and drive continuing education. So as you look at thinking about her ideal self and then how she actually implemented that right into her workforce, it was her responsibility and to build not just I'm bringing a product to the community, but I'm actually building something that's sustainable and I'm bringing jobs to people and I'm pushing them for what else they could do. You contrast that with Courtney Boot, and once again, it's not as if they are going out of business, but if you look in the grand scheme of things, their story was interesting because they launched and they actually went to safari hunters and gave them pairs of boots or game folks that would lead hunts, and they would give them boots to wear and started kind of the word of the mouth building that. The founder's husband had been building shoes since he was 15, and they were looking to build that culture as well. But a lot of what's centered around there, I think, had an impact from the country's economy and then Zimbabwe and what that did to what they were driving as a company. So they had their ideal self of they wanted to increase sales, right? And they did wanted to build some structure in Zimbabwe. However, in 2008, Zimbabwe was in turmoil, and they actually had to relocate to South Africa in their manufacturing for some time, which led to even more difficult managing of the company and driving sales during that time. And with that, massive inflation in Zimbabwe made it much more difficult to get their hands on raw materials. So as you look at the Courtney Boot Company, they were very much grounded. They wanted to increase sales, but there were some things that when you look at what were they intentionally driving, and they were really turned into we just have to survive. And a lot of that had to do with the external forces they were managing. So once again, I don't want to say the Courtney Boot Company is a complete disaster, but when you contrast the Soul Rebels and what they've been able to do, been resourceful, and the vision that they talk about is much different than what you read and see in the Courtney Boot Company, which is simply we're surviving on exports now. It's very, very competitive, and we're just trying to, keep people employed versus Soul Rebels. What's going on there? So positive and negative emotional attractors. I touched on this a little bit when it comes to Soul Rebels, that they're really embracing the idea of driving innovation and building a workforce, right? Not just bringing product, but also building that community of workers. The one negative side of things that I think we identified with Soul Rebels is around their the fact that they are not doing any outsourcing of the shoe design. So they've done some great innovation, but we look at that saying that could start to hold them back if some of the folks around them are innovating even more. And if they want to continue to grow, they may have to understand how they can leverage other folks in the footwear industry. When you look at Courtney, um, you know, they're being very resourceful using game skins. They are have the utmost highest quality. They're one of the what I call the most premier brands in the world. These pair of boots can cost upward of $1,000, and they limit their capacity to 30 pairs of boots a day to make sure they withhold the highest quality. Can turn that negatively as well as they look at how they're trying to manage that and possibly constricting some of their company. And once again, I want to go back to their whole mentality is just survival right now. That their vision is just simply we're surviving. We're surviving in a really tough market and an economy, and living off of really high inflation and with the what I call the tariffs that they're dealing with exports. So I talked a little bit about vision already, and the vision that Soul Rebels has, and what they're looking at doing around not just building a culture of community, they're pushing themselves to further their education and innovate in what they can do there. So finally, I want to talk just quickly about the resonant and dissonant leadership. So if I were to compare in the grand scheme of things, both of these leaders or both of these companies actually really practice resonant leadership. Um, so there's just some small differences I think that you can see some of the dissonant leadership in the Courtney Boot versus the resonant that you see in Soul Rebel. The resonant leadership really jumps out at you when you look at the Soul Rebels around how they are truly committed to completely sustainable materials, completely committed to building their education of their workers, right, and really being a part of that and driving themselves. Courtney, they have done that, right? They've survived in a tough economy. However, they're not. They're still in survival mode, right? And it's now just living by the day and trying to figure out how they can survive in the Zimbabwe market and just exporting out from there. Um, so once again, it's nitpicky, but when you look at the contrast there, a lot of that is external factors with what happened in Zimbabwe, but a lot we also identified as, are they being a little too constrictive of what they could go after in the marketplace? A premier brand, uh, there's got to be other ways that they can hire or they can leverage technology to get themselves out farther, further, and faster. So, all in all, it was a really fun project to look at in the footwear industry, how resourceful these companies both have been, really, as you look at it. And when you dig deeper, some of the fine details that have set the two companies apart, and you see what Soul Rebels is doing and the expansion they have versus the Courtney Boot Company surviving, but we wouldn't necessarily say is truly leading innovation and driving that massive growth. So thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and everyone enjoy the rest of their summer.